In boardrooms across the globe, finance today, the hardest question sits on the intersection of risk, trust, and AI driven transformation. Our guest, Shantanu Sengupta, has spent 3 decades right at that intersection. He is a seasoned global executive, board leader, former managing director, and APAC South head at Wells Fargo Bank in Singapore, where he led diverse businesses across border, cross teams, across countries, 15 countries, delivering strong PNL while navigating complex risk and regulatory landscapes. Before Wells Fargo, he held senior roles in Credit Agricole, CIB, HSBC, and ABN AMRO, including helping establishments in India, first ever Global Capabilities Center for ABN AMRO in 1999, pioneering move from industry. Today, Shantanu serves as a global advisory board member, partnering with tech-enabled startups, bringing contemporary board-level oversight on AI governance, cyber resilience, ESG stewardship, and digital risk. An MBA from FMS Delhi, economics graduate from Delhi University, IICE KPMG certified board of director. Shantanu Gupta, it's a honor to have you as part of our podcast. Let's explore. Before we dive into the topic, let's have a small video about Power of Knowing. Let's welcome Shantanu Gupta to our podcast event and dive into the topic. Sir, good evening. Welcome to our podcast, sir. How are you today?
Yeah, very good evening to you. And first of all, thanks very much for inviting me to your show. I understand this is the 336th episode, so you've come a long way, and I'm sure there is a long way to go as well.
Thank you, sir. Sir, a small intro about yourself, your journey. I've given what I had in my mind about you. I would
Mm.
like to hear it from you for the audience sake, sir.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think you have, given a quite a long introduction about myself and my background. So I'll keep it very brief. As you mentioned, I've been a senior global banking executive for about 3 decades. I've worked across India and Asia Pacific with large global banks in a variety of leadership.
Think
Geographies. And I also partner with startup founders in tech enabled businesses like cybersecurity, AI powered innovation marketplace, sustainable finance, etc. So that's been my journey. If you ask me, Mr. Prem Kumar, I think what has been the hallmark, right? I think for me, it's really been about navigating complexity, multiple geographies, multiple cultures. And one of, or really the key challenges I faced were really during the global financial crisis, prior to that, the Asian financial crisis, and more recently, the pandemic, right? These episodes made me realize that the true test of leadership actually comes during periods of crisis and uncertainty.
True, sir, because uncertainty and crisis are two things which change the business landscape itself. Sir, with that, I wanted to start with what have you been the key defining moments of your career, sir?
Yeah, so uh, let me go into a little bit of specifics. I think you mentioned at the beginning, right? Setting up what is today called as the Global Capability Center way back in 98, 99, right? When technology was not evolved, right? I think that was a key learning experience for me because I was leading that project. First, we had to centralize all our operations into Chennai, and then slowly bring one overseas location after another into that fold. Um, in fact, the technology we had was not fit for purpose. It was meant for decentralized setups. So we had to work with the vendor in terms of getting a centralized setup up and running. That was one. Secondly, even scanning, etc., was a challenge back then. So we had to, sort of rely on faxes and physical couriers as a backup. But I think that was a defining moment. The second one was, as I mentioned, during the global financial crisis, right? So as a business leader, throughout my journey, I've been focused on, growing the business, as you said, having P&L responsibility. But that period really tested my risk management skills, right? So you had, because of the global financial crisis, the leveraged trades getting unwound. You had to explain to customers, you had to explain to their boards what went wrong, restructure many of the trades, and also, sort of manage internal risk and credit committees and explain to them, why you were taking certain actions. The last one I wanted to highlight is during the pandemic, when I was working for a large U.S. bank, heading the region, and at that point of time, the bank decided to, sort of rationalize and simplify the legal entity structure. So there was a restructuring of offices and teams. So during the pandemic, I think it was quite challenging. As it is, you have the pandemic, and then you have this difficult situation to deal with. So I think what that episode really taught me was, frank and open conversations, communicating clearly, and engaging with stakeholders early. So if I look back, I think those two or three episodes clearly stand out.
You were saying GCCs, right? We saw something called as GCCs. Now I think those are called GCCs. When I was
Yeah.
part of the other old infrastructure deployments, we used to call them as ODCs rather than
Mhm.
GCCs, right? So
Yes.
today that name is shaped from ODCs to GCCs, where the customer had their own specific areas with the ISPs. So that's how it was. Now coming to this one, how should professionals think about risk governance and strategies?
Yeah. So the first things first, I think risk, strategy, and governance are interconnected, right? So risk and governance should certainly be embedded into strategy because they cannot be seen as silos, right? If I were to sort of think of it in terms of one simple sentence, it would be that strategy sets the direction, risk sort of defines the boundaries, and governance ensures that you stay disciplined and stay the course, right? I think for young professionals, I think technical expertise is certainly important. But I think the ones who go up the ladder are those that are able to appreciate the interconnectedness between strategy, governance, and risk, and the importance of that in an enterprise wide context.
Got it, sir. Now, how should the boards reimagine risk governance in a world where it is shaped by digital threats, geopolitical shocks, and climate risks? Are risk committees still backward looking?
You have asked a couple of questions very close to my heart, right? So let me try and answer the second part of your question first, right? The truth is that most boards are still governing with rear view mirrors instead of radars, right? Boards are overwhelmed with data, yet they are sadly starved of insights which help them make the decisions in real time. Um, so I think the traditional reports are backward looking, compliance heavy, and quite fragmented, frankly. So coming to the first part of your question, where you asked in terms of reimagining risk governance, first of all, we have to remember that we're living in an era of continuous disruption, right? Shaped by rapid technological changes, etc. So that has meant that the fundamental nature of risks has undergone a change, right? So what worked earlier in a more slow and predictable world does not necessarily help today. So what should happen? How should that reimagining that risk governance happen? I think first things first, I think the mindset of the board should move from merely reporting risks or discussing the risks to risk anticipation, right? All the risks that you mentioned, including the emerging risks, AI, cyber risks, ESG risks, etc., all of these need to be unified into an integrated enterprise risk management system. That's really the basic part. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, risks need to be embedded into enterprise strategy, because without that, you can't just work in silos in today's interconnected world. Finally, boards must use real-time dashboards. I mentioned that they are looking at rear view mirror rather than the radar. So risk cannot sort of the risk informed decisions cannot be taken based on past data alone, right? So we need to have real-time risk dashboards combined with scenario planning. um, Coming to mindset, I think another important change needs to happen, and that is the boards must move from a protective mindset to a resilience mindset. Because you cannot eliminate uncertainty, and boards cannot certainly do that, right? But it is to ensure that enterprises can withstand or recover from future shocks.
Rightly said, because everything scenario is changing over the world. Now you look at AI is not having the same thing yesterday. Today there is a different thing that is happening. So there is evolution that is happening. Now, how do you see the evolution of AI, especially as we are talking on the topic of finance side, where AI we are talking? So, is there something that we can talk around? How you see evolution of AI in banking and finance?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question. Already, I think we can see the use of AI very extensively in banking and finance, right?
Mm,
And secondly, banking and finance is the most regulated industry, right?
yeah, yeah.
So we're seeing if we look at the use cases, we are seeing use of AI in fraud detection, um, credit monitoring, um, risk modeling, and indeed customer engagement, right? Because nowadays you have more hyper personalized experience available because of AI to customers, right? So these are all great stuff. A lot of emerging use cases are coming up. Agentic AI for cyber defense is increasingly used globally in the financial services sector. Then you have the predictive liquidity and treasury management, which is also an important part. And finally, as I mentioned, AI enabled risk dashboards, as well as regulatory reporting, right? So these are emerging use cases. But at the same time, right, we have to be aware that AI has serious risks. I think these have been well documented, but some of these risks are emerging. I think bias, discrimination, the ethical part of it has been there for a long time. Then you have the lack of explainability. More recently, the data privacy and cyber vulnerabilities, right? So the key risks need to be really well understood and mitigated before AI can be deployed at scale. Otherwise, it would be really disastrous. uh, the other point which I wanted to highlight, regarding the evolution of AI in banking and finance, is really the need for collaboration, right? In terms of banks and fintechs. First things first, in India, of course, I think most of the work, while there would be foundational LLM and SLMs, I think most of the work would really happen at the application layer on the back of the infrastructure or the architecture, which would be like a public digital infrastructure, similar to what sort of UPI has done for the payment system, right? Now, obviously, banks have the balance sheet, they have the systems and processes, they have the regulatory discipline. On the other hand, you have fintechs, which have the scale, not the scale, sorry. Really, fintechs have the technology, the agility which is necessary, right? So I think, I mean, collaboration is important. And in this context, I just wanted to also highlight uh, RBI coming up with that free AI framework, which is really the framework for responsible and ethical enablement of AI in banking and financial services, right? Where they're talking about trust, explainability, all of these things. I think, but from an implementation side, uh, and safe experimentation, they are talking about regulatory sandboxes. In a country like India, where we need to promote a financial inclusion, maybe the large banks can afford the AI investments, but it's there is the need for shared AI infrastructure so that the fintechs, smaller NBFCs can also sort of benefit from it. So those are some of the critical elements that are emerging as the use of AI in finance big space.
Very crucial points is what I see because, as you rightly said, banks are fully regulated, and if a small transaction also goes into trouble, there is a lot of brand value which gets hit. So,
Indeed.
what role do you envisage for the boards in AI governance going forward?
Yes, that's a very important question. I mentioned earlier that for AI to be successful, it has to be the risks need to be managed and mitigated before it's deployed at scale, right? There is no doubt that AI will be central to India's growth journey, right? And indeed the world. I mean, that is beyond doubt. Whether the AI stock bubble bursts, that's a separate question, right? During the internet days, the intercom stocks, burst, but internet was there to stay, and it really revolutionized. So I think there is no doubt about that part, right? I think from a board perspective, first and foremost, I think the mindset needs to move from what I say awareness to accountability, right? Because this is a board level, AI governance is a board level responsibility and accountability. It certainly cannot be delegated to the IT departments. Now, board members don't need to be data scientists or indeed AI engineers, but they need to have reasonable digital fluency to ask the right questions, challenge the algorithms and the biases, and ask for explainability, right? So those things certainly sort of need to be there. Another couple of sort of important questions that I think the board should ask as far as AI governance is concerned is that who within the organization owns the AI outcomes, not just the deployment, but the consequences, right? That's very important. And the other question is really, in terms of striking the right balance between innovation and managing the risks, which I alluded to in the first instance. Um, as I see it, the role of the board is certainly not to slow AI down, but to make its acceleration and deployment really, really sustainable, right? So that's the crux of the whole, matter. Um, and I mentioned about the RBI free AI framework, excuse me. So that of course talks about certain things, board approved AI policy, the board defining the risk appetite, etc. So all of these are okay, but I think at the end of it, the boards must have accountability for AI, the board members must be digitally fluent, and be in a position to ask the right questions.
What I understand is when we look at AI implementation, the most of the critical question is how is the board getting convinced to have AI implemented? So that's the first question they will ask, and what is the ROI that I will be getting when I implement AI for certain sets of divisions or certain sets of application, right? So in an AI driven world, how must boards rethink oversight of cyber risk and ESG?
Yeah, I think the traditional role of the boards has been to supervise performance, right? And, ensuring compliance. That continues, but I think the primary focus of boards must be in terms of stewarding trust, resilience, and long term value. I think AI, cyber, ESG, these are no longer operational topics, right? These are emerging risks, right? And core governance priorities. Um, Similar to what I mentioned for AI, this oversight of these risks is really the board's responsibility, right? Um, Also, it is necessary for training and upskilling of the board, so that they're able to better appreciate the interplay of these variables. Since you mentioned cyber risk, I think I just wanted to make a quick comment on that. I think the mindset should change, because cyber risk is no longer about breach prevention. I think it's only a matter of time when breaches happen. You can't stop those breaches. But what is most important is basically having a resilience and recovery plan in terms of how the enterprise can recover, in terms of how quickly it can recover, how resiliently it can recover with minimum damage, right? And frankly, cyber and AI, cyber resilience, AI risks, I think these should be stress tested like we do financial stress testing. I know this is going a little bit into the future, but I think we should start gearing up for this.
Right, sir. Because what we see the kind of risks or cyber threats we have seen recently, where lot of things like big companies were under huge loss because of
Yes.
cyber threats and cyber ransomware. I think one of the major automobile company was out of production for almost 3 4 days because they were hit by a cyber security incident, right? So and
Yes.
they could not come out, and they had to do a lot of work, is what I understand. Now, what structures changes would be recommended for boards of the future, and how can the boards become more predictive than or predictive more than preventive, right? So we've been always that way of saying we will prevent. And if you look at the older ways of handling threat also, is we used to
Yeah.
prevent rather than predict. Your take on it, sir?
Yeah, no, I think it's an important question, right? And as I alluded to earlier, the first things first is that basically there has to be a change in mindset, as you rightly mentioned. The traditional board model, right, which we have with quarterly meetings, etc., was designed for a much slower, more predictable world. We are living in an age of continuous disruption, technological, geopolitical, you name it, right? So the traditional model doesn't work. You rightly pointed out, I think agenda must shift really from just a review of operations to strategic foresight, right? So I mentioned earlier about scenario planning, stress testing. I think boards should be spending more time on that rather than just reviewing what happened in the past, right? This is really, I think, an emerging core board responsibility going forward, right? Um, I also mentioned earlier that boards need to become more familiar and start using AI enabled real time dashboards because, you cannot simply govern in a digital world using analog information, right? So it's necessary to make that transition to AI powered real time dashboards. Um, I also highlighted, I think it's important for board directors, to upskill and train themselves so that they can, interpret AI-driven dashboards. They can question the algorithms, understand biases, right? You can bring wisdom to the table for sure, years of experience, etc. But if you're not familiar with the emerging risks, you wouldn't be able to ask the right questions or indeed challenge constructively. I think the final point from my side, and which I make at various forums, is really the composition of boards, right? And that composition of boards, everyone talks about diversity. Diversity is very important, but diversity should be seen in all angles. Certainly gender, but also age, skills, and experience, and also importantly cognitive diversity, right? you know you should bring in people with different thinking and mindset. In some of the global boards that I am a member, as part of their assessment, I had to undergo a psychometric assessment, right? There is no right or wrong in a psychometric assessment. They just wanted to make sure that the members of the board that they're appointing are not the people who are thinking alike, but are able to think differently and out of the box. So I think those are certain things that really need to be kept in mind. I think the moot point is, as I've mentioned earlier, also move from periodic review to a continuous oversight, and to quote your own, words, move from really reactive governance to more predictive risk management and governance.
I think very critical points when we look at we were always, as we started with the note of predictive, saying that this is what is the, we were never in that preventive. Now with the tools coming in, and what
Mhm,
we have to see
mhm,
is you have a mechanism that suggests you that this could be one of the vulnerabilities. This CVV can impact your this one, this pointer can be your, this port or a loose port can help you, help the people to get into your system. So these are preventive measure. And the other thing that I we've been discussing in other podcasts is that most of the time we don't look at the access review. That is the
Yes.
bigger point that we have to look at. And then today also we don't look at ports which are open. So we keep most of the ports open and don't look at how many ports are still not covered in our surveys. Now, I think with the digital technologies that you are having, which can enable those saying, giving you a scanned report saying these are the ports that are available for
Mm.
openly and people can get hacked. So this is a very crucial point we see technology enabling us, right? So now coming to the listen, what unique value do you bring to the boards when we are you said you are consulting as a board member there. So
Yeah.
what is that value you could bring as a board
Yeah.
member?
That's an interesting question. So I think two things really. One is really my 3 decades of experience in banking and finance risk management. That combined with as I mentioned recently, I've been partnering with startups in emerging technologies, AI, cyber risk management, climate tech, etc. So what I'm able to do is basically help boards really navigate today's complex world by aligning sort of capital strategy, risk, and all these new emerging risks into a cohesive, should I say, future ready governance framework, right? So that's if what I sort of bring to the table.
So what we are understanding is it is more important that the experience talks while people who are new to the industry. I will take an example here because
Yes.
we are from the generation where we've seen the PCs with a monitor
Yeah.
separately. There is something. Today's generation has a laptop which is powered on and everything is running. So we don't come with that experience counts, and we always look at the ground level to see what is there, and then I think what we are suggesting. So, in addition to the board roles, you have been transitioned into startup advisory in the recent
Yeah.
years, right? So, what difference have you observed in startups as compared to the corporate life? Because corporates are having a set guidelines and stuff. Now,
Yeah.
startups are starting everything fresh. So, your take on
Yeah.
it.
No, no, it's a great question, right? And I learned it the hard way. So, first things first, you have to unlearn a lot of things, right? And reinvent yourself. So, to that extent, you have to be open and flexible. Yes, your corporate life experience helps a lot, but startups is a completely different world, right? So in our corporate life, in banking, we are used to hierarchies, decision making layers, etc. Here, in startups, speed and agility is really really critical, right? You have to move fast. Sometimes you don't have forget perfect information. You have very little information, but you still need to act, right? In the corporate life, we used to look at maybe 3-year, 5-year plans. I mean here, forget quarterly reviews. In startups, you are doing daily pivots, right? You mentioned technology changing. It's changing so rapidly that what was considered cutting edge in the morning may become obsolete in the evening, right? Uh, the other interesting part, really, with the startups is basically I had to adjust my lens and really appreciate how Gen Z shows up at work, right? Because, if you look at the startups ecosystem, it's just, obviously dominated by Gen Z. So they have a different perspective. But I think if you ask me in terms of my association with startups, it has really been a very fulfilling journey. And I certainly found renewed purpose. And I learned a lot because, my career in banking and finance was bereft of technology. I mean, this last couple of years has given me a good flavor of technology. And so, because of this, I can have some informed conversations on technology with technology specialists like yourself.
Great, sir. Now, how has your definition of leadership changed over the years? Because That also has been changing. If you really look at the way leadership
Yeah.
has shaped from, say, 20 years back to today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there have been quite a few, changes, but I think the core principles remain the same. Having said that, right, in my early on in my career, I thought that leadership was just about, execution and delivering the results, right? As I moved up the ladder and my responsibilities increased, I sort of realized that leadership is actually more about judgment, um, taking decisions which have a long-term impact, and also staying grounded, especially in a complex environment and in an uncertain world where it's impossible to get all decisions right. But as long as you have thought through the long-term consequences of your actions, I guess you'd be all right. As I mentioned, some leadership principles, at least for me, throughout my 30-year career, have remained the same, which is basically, I believe in, leading myself first before leading the team or the business, right? So setting the right example, leading with empathy, being open and transparent, encouraging participation, and most importantly, having worked in diverse regions, across cultures, I think respecting diverse views is something which I have held close to my heart throughout my career.
That's really because the experience that we have gained over the last 30 years. I'm also around having the same experience
Hmm.
as you over the last. I started my career in 97, so it is going to be 30 years is what I also see. I think the experience that we've gained and the projects that we have got, I think nobody has or will be having going forward is what I would say, because
Mm.
we've gone on to the ground. Today we are all cloud based environments. We've seen servers physically, lifted them physically, and we've rack mounted them, we've relocated them and stuff like that when we were doing these servers, right? So now there's a great change that has happened, even the technology side. Everything is virtual now. AI is taking up a lot of work for us, and it is enhancing the way that we are using work now. In what's the best piece of advice have you ever received?
Um, Let me think through. I've had some great leaders and mentors whom I worked for. Um, One thing which readily comes to mind is really one of my leaders during the early stage of my career telling me that, you know, being busy isn't the same thing as creating value, right? So, as a leader, just don't need to be busy all the time, right? Just pause, prioritize, and focus on the things that really are significant, right? I think that helped me during difficult transformation exercises. Cut out the noise. When you are under intense pressure, just focus on the core things that matter, right? So, for example, in one of the transformation exercises, you know, I just focused on a few critical decisions, the risk controls, the client priorities, rather than being consumed by all that's happening around you. So I think being focused and being able to prioritize is certainly a good piece of advice that I received early on in my career, which helped me throughout.
I think we had great mentors, is what I would also say, because the leaders shaped us when they used to tell us you have to face the music so that you understand what exactly is happening.
Hmm.
So that's the kind of thing that what is one leader who truly inspires you and why? Or who is one leader who truly. inspires you and why?
As I mentioned, there are many leaders whom I respected and looked up to during the course of my career. But if you were to ask me in terms of broad philosophy and ideology, I think Martin Luther King Jr. comes to mind, right? Um, because he was the one person who always said that leadership is not about just doing what is right, but it's sometimes necessary to take the difficult, quote, unpopular decisions, right? And he did that in a quote unquote humane manner, right? So this, philosophy has helped me. Imbibing that philosophy has helped me, especially in difficult situations, right? Important to listen more attentively and actively, act with integrity, and most importantly, taking difficult decisions, even when they are, or difficult decisions, or actually having difficult conversations, even when they are not comfortable at all.
I think decisions that we take when we are not comfortable do matter. So, and that is one thing that. Now, how do professionals build trust across cultures and hierarchies?
I think some of the things which I just mentioned, right? Um, Being consistent, um, listening actively and deeply, and I think respecting the cultural diversity and nuances, right? Authority of a leader may come with the role and the title, right? But trust comes from how you really show up, especially in diverse cultures, right? And I experienced this firsthand, leading diverse teams and business across multiple geographies in Asia. So having that open mindset, respecting cultures, is really key to building the trust of the team.
Sir, we have been talking about leadership, and few people have been inspiring it, and
Hmm.
these leaders are always born for us to bring up the leadership skills at least we've
Hmm.
gained, right? So looking at that,
Yes,
what
correct.
will the future ready leaders look like, or how do you define the future ready leaders?
Yeah, no, I think we've touched on this aspect during our conversation. But if I were to broadly summarize, I think leadership is moving away from a control and authority perspective to more of a stewardship, the guiding, the enabling kind of a role, right? So if you look at today's day and age, and also what's coming up in the future, I think combining strategic thinking with digital fluency, right? We talked about that. Important to have that emotional intelligence and grounded by strong values. I think those really would set a leader apart in future. I also wanted to mention another thing, and I'm thinking aloud as we speak, and this is a term which I have been using increasingly in recent days. We're living in an age of continuous disruption, right? Technology, geopolitical, etc. So I think it's important for a leader to have that adaptive intelligence as well, right? Being flexible and nimble, change leadership style as per the situation demands.
You are saying, with you said there is a lot of technological changes and other things are there, and
Hmm.
there is constant rush of information everywhere. Now you see everywhere there is a lot of rush, and we are, I think, we are the one generation which is digitally overloaded as well, is what I think, right? So now looking at that, how do you think leaders, or anybody for that matter, not only leaders, how do you unwind and disconnect? is there a way that you can look at that
Yeah.
piece, because we are always connected also today's environment,
Yeah.
internet is always available. So your take on it.
Yes. Yeah, no, great one. So personally, I want that space and time where I'm disconnected, right, from all that information overload which you sort of mentioned. I find solace in yoga, meditation, and soulful music, right? They sort of help me slow down, reflect, pause, and sort of reset mentally.
What you're saying is pause is the important point, because
Yes,
pause is one thing. When you run too much, I think somewhere you have to pause is what you're saying.
yes,
Rewind and spend some time alone in listening something, which I think, what is your point?
yes.
Sir, you do you enjoy reading or listening, sir?
Yes, I do. It's difficult to find the time, but I do love books on leadership,
Hmm.
management, business, and importantly on spirituality as well, right? So those are stuff that I love listening to.
No, no, and you are saying listening right now.
Hmm,
There's a lot of leadership lessons and leadership things that have
hmm,
come up in today's environment. YouTube is
hmm.
filled of leadership now. Podcasts platforms have increasingly focused on leadership today, right? And
Hmm.
what is one book that has left a mark
Yeah.
on you?
Yeah, but no, it's a important observation that you've made. I've been a recent convert to listening to podcasts. So when I am on a walk or exercising, I do listen to podcasts. Earlier, it used to be just music,
Yeah.
but I'm also old-fashioned, right? So I love the printed book, and one
Mm.
of the books that I read some years ago, "In Search of Excellence" by Tom Peters and Robert Waterman, sort of left an indelible impression, right? Because even in today's age of disruption, culture and values and culture, values, and strategy, matter very much, right? So that's really the core of that book.
I take that, sir. Now, who has been a constant strength of source of strength, if you have to ask, because again, with overwhelmed knowledge that we are having, we lose
Yeah,
interest in most of the time, and
yeah,
there is no energy to take things out. So who's been one person like that who can be there for you, sir? Kind of anybody there?
yeah. So that's an easy one to answer for me personally, right? So my family has been a source of strength, especially my wife, right? Uh, they have supported me while keeping me grounded through transitions and big decisions. So I owe a debt of gratitude to my family, especially my wife, my daughter, and my parents.
Great, sir. Because today's generation, we don't have time to even spend time with our kids today, because they are also running, we are also running, and that's a great strength only family you can get. So that's so. With this, I would like to take a pause here and see if I
Sure.
get any questions.
Yes,
Let
please.
me check, sir. Yeah. Okay. Sir, one pointer that I want to ask as a last pointer before I
Hmm.
summarize.
Mm.
Uh, what does a fulfillment day look for you after a engaged day, right? So your take on it, sir.
Yeah. So for me, I think I love meeting people, having good conversations, right? I like to weigh in and take thoughtful decisions. And most importantly, and I think I have alluded to it earlier, I like to take the time to sort of learn and reflect. So if there is a day which combines all of this, meeting people, having good, intelligent conversations, making those thoughtful decisions, and indeed having some time to pause and reflect, that makes my day, right? I see uh, the impact that I have made rather than how busy I have been. So that's how I look at a fulfilling day.
Thank you for that, sir. Sir, I have taken some of the pointers that we had discussed over the last 50 minutes. I just want to summarize
Yes.
before we conclude. Sir, board risk thinking is a judgment muscle, not a compliance checklist, is what you said in the start of this. Now, AI, cyber, and finance are now one story because you need to protect the finance industry or the banking industry to look at use the latest technology, cyber controls on it, and we don't have the loss. And if risk does not show up in capital, it does not exist in the board also. So that's what we want to look at. Cultures, incentives, and ESGs are not soft topics anymore. They are the hard drivers of resilience today and for validation. Now, startups and incumbents that treat governance as a growth enabler will attract capital and better talent, is what you said, right? So that's a boards that win the AI driven finance are those rehearsing crisis that are rehearsing the crisis, right? So challenge models, stay deeply curious, is what we would look like. These are the few pointers that I've noted when you were speaking. So any final pointers before we close, sir?
No, I think you have summarized it well. I think one pointer that or food for thought, if you may, that I'd like to leave behind is really the fact that we are living in an age of continuous disruption, which I have mentioned several times, and it's very important for all of us, right? Whether it's in the board or leaders, to continuously upskill, reskill, and keep abreast of the new things that are emerging, right? Because in an AI driven world, judgment is what will differentiate humans, right? Because human intelligence has to, at the end of the day, override artificial intelligence, right? And there has to be human in the loop. So unless we spend the time basically learning and developing ourselves, we won't be able to make those judgmental calls that will be increasingly necessary in an AI driven world.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you, Shantam sir. Thank you for taking us inside the boardroom and showing how the real risks that work in a AI-driven financial world, from Basel to cyber to ESG, culture, and capital allocation. For those who are watching this and listening here, here's your invitation. Take an idea from today, and maybe it's reframing the cyber in financial terms, maybe building a challenge board, maybe starting it with speak up culture and stuff like that. Let's turn this topics into your own leadership circle in this week. And thank you for joining Power of Knowing Forum's podcast series. And good day, sir. Any good day, sir. Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being part of this show, and I wish you and the show great success.
Thank you, sir.